to have you join us today for Wednesday, October 18th, 2023, for our afternoon work session here in the Larimer County Commissioners Conference Room at our Administrative Services Building, Fort Collins. We are here today for our work session on our 2024 budget. And I am Larimer County Commissioner Jody Shabik-Nally, Chair of the Board of County Commissioners, joined by my colleagues here today, Larimer County Commissioner Kristen Stevens and Larimer County Commissioner John Confalis. Also here at the table is our County Manager Lorenda Volker, and sitting off to the side is our Assistant County Manager Lori Kadrich, and our our Performance Budget and Strategy Director Josh Fudge. But today our presentation will be by Matt Behanen, our
Budget Team Lead.
Budget Team Lead. I thought maybe there was kind of a new title. I want to make sure I had it. So I'm just going to turn it, and I know we have Alex Jordan here. I'm going to let you introduce Alex, but let's go ahead and get rolling. I know we have a lot of things to cover today, and thank you, Matt and Budget Team, Mighty Budget Team, for pulling this together today for us.
Thanks, Commissioners. Computer's having some fun times, so I will just introduce this while it gets loaded up. We are here to talk about the 2024 proposed budget. We started working on this in April with a SWOT analysis kickoff. And over the summer and fall, we've had many, many meetings. We've reviewed many proposals. And we've put that all into a document. Every year, the proposed budget is due on October 15th. That's a statutory deadline. And that was this Sunday. So we met our deadline. It's been sent to you via email and posted on the county website. And we're going to talk about some of the material details of what's in there. Wow. Here, okay. Josh said it's temperamental. But I think we made it. That's a beautiful picture of my family. All right, we might have to do this without a presentation up on the screen. You have paper copies. Mm-hmm. If there's somebody online that wants to see it, it'll be published to larimer.gov/budget right after this meeting. So our agenda today, we're going to talk about the budget calendar. We're going to talk about the fiscal factors that have been all around us in 2023 that we're dealing with and contributed to the budget. We're going to talk about the ballot items related to property taxes, our largest revenue source. We will go over all the key decisions with the budget, both reductions and new funding for service proposals. We'll review the budget by category, give an overview of the budget, show general fund balance projection, and then talk about public feedback. Alex, can I ask you to see if this will work on your thing?
Yeah, of course.
In the meantime. Okay. So, like I said, budget calendar starts in April of every year. We do a SWOT analysis and an initial forecast for you. SWOT is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So every service category gets together. That's groups of departments. So they meet and they discuss what are the strengths, opportunities, weaknesses, and threats for each program area. And then in May, you all set initial budget targets. So that's we call it the base budget, or maybe you heard the phrase, we bake it in the cake. This is the budget from the prior year plus inflation minus any one-time programs that have ended or capital projects that have finished up. So that base budget becomes what departments start with in the summer, and then over the summer they develop proposals. This year we also asked for reductions, and proposals for how to meet those reduction targets. And then in the summer, you also have a work session with the Director of Human Resources about compensation, and you give direction on compensation. August budgets are due to our office and capital plans as well. And that is when the county manager and budget staff meet with every single department. It's about 27 different meetings. Every department, every elected official, we go over every line in the budget, every position, every request. Late September, we have a retreat with you, and we summarize everything that's been discussed and proposed and put together. And then we put that all into a document called the proposed budget. And so, like I said, October 15th, proposed budget's due per state statute, and that is what the county manager writes a letter about and says, okay, here's the budget. And today we're having our work session to review that. November 6th, we will have a public hearing on the 2024 budget, as well as landfill rates for 2024. That is the day before the election. So on November 7th, the hearing, it'll be here in the hearing room at 200 West Oak, yeah.
And Matthew, I'm sorry, could you speak just a little bit louder for me? Just a little. Thank you.
I'll try and get the microphone a little better. So November 7th, day after our public hearing, that's Election Day. It's important this year because of the property tax proposition HH, which would impact our largest revenue source. And so in November, we have a chance to meet again with you to review and perhaps revise the proposed budget based on everything that happens on Election Day and any other information we have since the proposed budget's come out, any public input that's been received. And we will, if HH doesn't pass, or if it does, we will have a budget adoption hearing on December 14th. Now, Proposition HH, we'll talk about some of the impacts of that later, but it does impact the deadlines for the assessor and for certification of mill levies. So if HH does not pass, that final certification of property values is typically December 10th. If HH passes, that gets pushed back to December 29th. But our statutory deadline to adopt a budget is the end of the year. And we kind of had a discussion, internally about should we wait and schedule a hearing? It's actually on a weekend, the 30th, after the certification comes in. What happens is that final December certification, it usually changes up or down in property tax revenues by about $1 million. And in the past, the commissioners have either pulled from fund balance or added to fund balance and not changed program decisions with that final certification. So we felt comfortable at this time scheduling that for December 14th and just leaving that as the hearing deadline for the budget adoption. And that'll take place in the hearing room downstairs here in this building.
So I will say regarding that, if we do adopt a budget that you're not comfortable with, you can amend the budget. So a budget is a plan. That's always a possibility. We want to meet the deadline, so we have funds to spend in January to do payroll and purchase things that we do. And so it's important to adopt the budget, and nobody wants to come in on the 30th or 31st to adopt a budget. So you still have options once that's done.
Okay. There will be some, if HH passes, some additional time for taxing districts, because they all receive their certifications at the end of that month too. So that would go into January. The state law does allow, and we did last year, have the commissioners, you are able to delegate the authority to certify tax districts' mill levies. You can delegate that authority to the budget director, for example, and then he can certify that and send that to the state as appropriate. Okay. So talking about 2024, we first need to talk about 23. So you'll see when we get to the expenses, we're about nearly $100 million less from the revised budget to the 23 revised budget to the 24 proposed budget. And that really is because in 23 we are completing so many major capital projects. The Community Justice Alternatives Women's Facility, the Jail Improvement Project, the Behavioral Health Facility, Human Services renovation at Blue Spruce. All of these are slated to be finished in 23, and so the budgets will go away. Also, we're dealing with an environment of high inflation. So technology costs, construction costs, food, it's a tight labor market. The economy is driving up our costs. Would add that we have unfunded mandates from the state legislation in the areas of public safety, jail, police officer liability, stormwater permitting. We've added positions for. These types of things have all added to our costs, and you'll see that in the proposed budget. So let's review HH and Initiative 50. If there are any questions at any time, just stop me. So Proposition HH does a lot of things, but I just want to focus on the property tax revenue aspects as it relates to Larimer County. So HH, it lowers property tax revenues. And it does that in a few ways. At first, it increases the value reduction on your home. So as a reminder how property taxes are calculated, the assessor will every 2 years do a reappraisal based on market values, and they will assign a market value to every property. You have an opportunity to protest that, and that has happened over the summer. And then in the tax formula, you're allowed to take a value reduction. Currently, it's $15,000 for residential properties. Proposition HH would increase that value reduction to $50,000 for taxes paid in 24, and then $40,000 for the following 9 years of the period of Proposition HH. The second way it reduces property assessed values is every classification of property type, meaning residential, commercial, industrial, vacant, agriculture. There's an assigned assessment rate. And so under current law, help me out, Alex,
6.765.
And it would be lowered to?
6.7, and this is for residential properties.
For the residential property type, which is the largest in terms of value, it would lower that assessment rate. And then for non-residential, like what's commercial? I think that's the largest non-residential.
Commercial is currently 27.9, but would be lowered to 27.85 for 2023.
So assessed values would be reduced. The second way Proposition HH would lower property tax revenues is through a cap on annual revenue growth for certain taxing authorities. And so this would be based on CPI, Consumer Price Index, the inflation rate of the prior year. Now, the elected board can hold a public hearing and exceed that if they so choose. But the proposed 2024 budget is built as if Proposition HH does pass and that we remain under that cap. Okay, so the other property tax ballot item that has impacted the 2024 proposed budget is Initiative 50. Now, in the summer, we didn't know if this effort was going to be on the 23 ballot or the 24 ballot. And so now we know that it is going to be on the 2024 ballot, and it's much shorter than Proposition HH. It's a constitutional amendment, And do you want to just read it, Alex? I think it's just like 2 sentences.
Yeah, it's if the total statewide property tax revenue is projected to go up more than 4% over the preceding year, voter approval is needed for government to retain additional revenue.
So it's a lot simpler, but how that would be implemented and how that would impact Larimer County specifically is really unknown, and that's a big. It's difficult to add a lot of new services or additional funding when something is that big of a change is unknown, and how that would be implemented with different values increasing different places statewide and population growth. Yeah, your questions?
Commissioner Gonzalez, did you have a question?
Yes. First of all, I need to comment that I may make a New Year's resolution to ramp up my sartorial splendor next year when we have these kinds of meetings, but that's not my question, sorry. So regarding Initiative 50, which is a proposed constitutional change, which the signatures that have been gathered this summer, it's been certified, so the likelihood is it will be on the ballot in 2024. And what you said, Alex, about the 4% cap, is that in perpetuity, regardless of any changing economic conditions, inflationary pressures, et cetera?
Yeah, that's correct.
So if inflation were higher than 4% or population growth were higher than 4%.
And if one quick follow-up, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And in terms of, and that applies to local property tax revenue as well as, how does that affect the state? And would we have to go to a vote of the people in order to change that? Could we D50 like we D-Bruced if that was the will of the people?
I think that's some of the unknowns. Does it say statewide vote? It's a statewide revenue increase. So from what I understand, it would be a statewide vote.
From what we've read, that there would be a statewide vote for any taxing authority to override that cap.
Okay, that's good, I guess.
Thank you. Go ahead
Yeah.
and proceed. Thank you.
Okay. So in response to these property tax ballot initiatives, we implemented a hiring freeze over the summer from June. It was lifted in August. And then, like I mentioned, we requested all departments and elected offices funded by property taxes to come up with $7 million total reduction proposals. And it was a different amount for different departments based on their size and how much property taxes they received. But this was a significant ask of staff. And we just want to thank all the elected officials and department directors and budget staff that went through this process. Only $2 million of these reductions will be part of the 2024 proposed budget, but the process of going through all the programs and services, these were not trivial cuts. This was not just the lunch budget or some minor thing that could be easily reduced. So like I said, Proposition HH is assumed to pass in the 2024 proposed budget. So all the numbers you see and all the decisions are based on that scenario. And so just want to walk through the list of total reductions. And if you have any questions, just feel free to stop me. So the first reduction was damage assessments in the assessor's office, $15,000. This was equipment and on-call pay. Clerk and recorder, 3 positions, reduction in personnel. Commissioner's outreach software, the budget simulator tool that we use, and then also some radio outreach. Data reporting, licensing, software licensing, $75,000 reduction. Emergency management projects, $20,000 reduction. Code compliance personnel, shifting some of those, the workload to the building fund out of the general fund. ending the North Range Behavioral Health contract, which was $57,000 reduction. Local funding for a state wellness court coordinator, $38,600. Coroner vehicle fleet reduction, $10,000. County attorney admin, $25,000. District attorney IT process improvement projects and their fleet vehicles. Workforce development, grant matches, a reduction in the building component replacement plan funding, eliminating bag fee administration, health and environment internships and water association dues, $37,500. Repurposed senior tax work-off funds, $30,000. Human services general assistance funding, $50,000. Technology reductions in IT, $150,000. Natural resources general fund support, $75,000, and that will continue to be reduced over 3 years. Sheriff personnel, which would be supply, dispatch, and a jail deputy, $265,000. General fund support for the ranch, $180,000. Treasurer projects, $300,000. So those all total $2 million.
So I will add, for anyone who may be listening, the FTE, the positions that are listed here are vacant. And so departments, because we did the hiring freeze, had those positions vacant and offered those as potential options to meet their budget target because the position was vacant.
So service proposals. We did consider new funding. We accepted requests for additional dollars. And so $18 million were requested in general fund service proposals. But only $3.5 million were included in the 2024 proposed budget. And these were really requests that we kind of tightened up the criteria of what we could recommend. So if it was a state mandate, if it was in an existing contract, critical service, high commissioner priority, or the cost of inflation just drove up the cost of the service. Those were the types of things that were included. And I will just highlight a few of them. The entire list can be found in the proposed budget document. So just to highlight a few, HH implementation in the assessor's office, $50,000. That's to determine primary and secondary home ownership. Juvenile offender transport, $226,000. Part of that is one time to buy a vehicle. Box Elder Dam maintenance per our agreement, IGA, $15,000. Election worker payroll costs, $59,000. And then in the sheriff's office, there were three pretty significant needs. Property and casualty insurance renewal was almost $400,000, $386,000, $945,000. And then inmate food and medical costs, $2.3 million. Ammunition budget shortfall, apparently due to conflicts internationally, there's an ammunition shortage. And so the cost of purchasing ammunition is risen significantly, so there's $100,000 there. And the full list will be on the website.
So of the 3.5 million funded, almost 3 million was those sheriff's office expenses, the food and medical. The other requests were really pretty small requests in comparison. The next largest one, I think, was juvenile transport because of the new requirement to transport to a second facility, splitting those teams, requiring more people just to meet the state requirement. So you'll see, and I hope the listening public understands, we can't not fund inmate medical and food service. That's a mandatory service, and that is the bulk of this request.
Commissioner Stevens, I see you have your hand raised.
Yes. With the proposition HH implementation of $50,000, should that not go through, will that be an exercise that continues because it's it may be valuable in other scenarios that are out there, or will that just be shelved then, and that money will come back into the general fund?
Yeah, with all of these, we will reconsider after the election which should go forward and stay in the adopted budget. That's kind of why we call it the proposed budget, is we're trying to align the budget as it will be, as we hope it will be, as we propose it to be. But the adopted budget, we'll have an opportunity to remove some of those and also add in unfunded requests that had merit or, were needed, but maybe didn't have the dollars behind them. I hate to touch this PowerPoint too much, but it's up, so I'm going to try and show it. So we did review and when we met with you at the budget retreat, we talked about what might go into the adopted budget should HH fail. And so here is a list of a few, this is not a comprehensive list of what will be in the 2024 adopted budget should HH fail, but here are a few examples of what could be in there. So community development character area plans, this would be for like LaPorte, Red Feather Lakes, some of those smaller unincorporated communities that don't have a specific small area plan. A family advocate FTE for the coroner's office. They have investigators and highly qualified experts at death investigations. And so this position would be more of a family advocate and communicating with families of victims. A domestic violence prosecution team. I don't know if you're aware, domestic violence cases have risen over the past few years. And so this would be a team of 3, a prosecutor, investigator, and a victim advocate working together. Fire mitigation grant program. This is an existing program with the Emergency Management Department that is successful and was valuable, and we could supplement funding for it. Transportation master plan update. When we do community conversations, one of the things we always hear is that county roads they need additional capacity. And this transportation master plan update would help refine which roads and would be prioritized for future projects. Eviction prevention, this was on the last work session that you saw. Some of these could be funded through federal COVID response dollars. If HH fails, we could shift those some of those to the general fund, and this could be one of those housing items. Cybersecurity analyst, we are under cybersecurity threats at unprecedented levels. And then a civil unit sergeant to run all of the civil process requirements at the sheriff's office that they are required to do. And this is their number one priority for service proposals. So this is just a sample.
This list in yellow is what we would recommend potentially adding back if HH would fail. We know that there are real needs here. These have been prioritized by these service areas. And so these are the things that we would like you to consider if HH does not pass in November.
Commissioner Kafalis.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Question I have is, so these unfunded requests we would consider should Proposition HH fail, and then our county manager further clarified that the ones highlighted would be a higher priority perhaps, or ones that we've suggested we would bring back.
In this table, yeah.
And my question is, though, how will we sustain these budget items knowing that in 2024 their Initiative 50 will be on the ballot and perhaps could pass, which will have more impacts on county budget? How
Yeah.
would we sustain these?
At the November budget retreat after the election, we can show you, and we'll show you the forecast. We lovingly call it the Green Mountain, the future fund balance reserves in the general fund, and the impact of adding each one of these. Some of these have one-time costs or potential outside funding, but we can review all of that in each decision, how it impacts that future forecast under different scenarios. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and most importantly, a few of these are some of the larger ones are one-time funding. They're not necessarily ongoing. And the departments were asked the same question you asked. How will you make these sustainable? Why are these your priorities? And it's because it's where they're spending time, where they're, so the civil unit sergeant, for example, it looks more expensive than it will ongoing because when you first hire a position, you have to hire equipment and get a vehicle and do those kind of things. Ongoing costs would be less for that, but it might reduce overtime in that unit, which might come close to paying for itself because that's a required service the sheriff must do. That's just one example of the kind of conversations we've had about each of these.
Okay, so let's look at the budget numbers. You know, with nearly or more than half a billion, 500 million is half a billion in revenues. There's like 11,000 lines of budgets in the system that we upload into our financials, right? So to summarize it in a table with 8 lines doesn't really tell the story, but I will try to tell the story behind some of these numbers. So first, property taxes. We talked about HH and the revenue cap, and that would be included here. So inflation in December of 2022 is just over a hair over 8%. So revenue growth for existing properties would be capped at that 8%. So the remainder, as you see, it's 12, is made up of growth in new properties added to the tax roll. So that's 3%. And then non-capped property tax revenues that the county budgets for, such as voter-approved mills for improvement districts and also Foothills Gateway. Those are not capped, and so the increase would be more than the 8%. We've heard the question a few times, what is the big deal here? Proposition HH caps you at 8 to 12%. That seems like quite a bit of revenue. So the response to that question is, we remind you that it's a biannual reappraisal. So last year there was no reappraisal. The increase on existing properties was 0. And then the second is the lag in the timing of the reappraisals. So the reappraisal is happening this year, 2023 tax year, on a 2022 date to be implemented. We receive the revenue in 2024, which, if it's a recession and there's a decline in values, it's actually a beneficial thing because it gives us time to see that happen, prepare for it, adjust the budget accordingly. But in times of high inflation, high cost increases, tight labor market like there is now, we bear all the brunt of all those cost increases before the reappraisal happens. And so we have to wait for the revenues to catch up to some of these cost increases. So that's property taxes increased under Prop HH to 179 million countywide, including all improvement districts and Foothills Gateway. Sales, use, and other taxes. We had been seeing double-digit growth year over year in this category. That is done. Through 2 quarters of 23, sales taxes, retail sales taxes, we're flat, 23 over 22. Building use taxes are down. Vehicle use taxes are still up, but we're forecasting only a 2% increase. The state economic, their fiscal staff, they put out a quarterly economic forecast, and they're forecasting 3.4% increase from this year to next. And so we're comfortable with 2, but the double-digit increases are likely done. So we'll continue to monitor this because sales tax is very volatile, and keep you updated. So intergovernmental is down significantly because of the end of COVID recovery funds. And we budgeted in 23 $10 million reimbursement for flood reimbursement from FEMA through the state. I checked in with Road and Bridge staff and emergency management, and we're still waiting on that 10 million. So that may roll over from 23 to 24. That's intergovernmental. Licenses and permits are down overall, largely because of a one-time $6 million permit that was recorded by Road and Bridge in 23 for road projects associated with the North Landfill. So that's no longer in the 2024 budget. Natural resources, camping and park permits are in this category. Those are up $300,000. Building permits in community development are down $500,000, are budgeted to be down. We'll continue to monitor that, but construction has slowed. External charges for services, some of the largest ones, this will be like landfill fees. You go to the landfill to clean out your garage. Those are declining, $483,000. Event income at the ranch is up, budgeted to be $2.3 million higher. There's a few fees associated with elections, and because next year is a big election year, those are projected to be $500,000 higher. And then also treasurer tax collection fees. As the tax rolls increase, we collect taxes on behalf of all the taxing authorities, and there is a fee associated with that we collect. So that is increasing by $1.3 million. Interest was interesting this year. We adopted a budget of $2.4 million at the start of 23. And you'll see 2023 revised budget is almost 10 million, and it could be even higher than that in talking to treasurer's office staff. So two reasons that the interest is much higher than we originally expected. The first is that interest rates are higher, and so we're getting a higher return on the interest-bearing accounts that our reserves are sitting in. And the second is our reserve, there's two ways to get interest. It's the rates and then the amount. So the reserves that we've had from the federal COVID recovery dollars, and then also just all the capital projects that have been cash funded, those reserves have been building up over time and invested properly. And so that's why those two things together have increased our interest earnings category. We're expecting them to stay high in 2024, but this is not a long-term boon. We're not going to get $10 million a year, in perpetuity, where the federal funds rate is projected to decline as inflation has come down, and also we're spending down our fund balances. So this has been a nice to have, but it's a short-term revenue. And then internal and other revenue, these are transfers in between funds, general fund to a facilities fund. And so they're declining because of the capital project being finished, rather. So that's kind of the story behind the revenues. If there are any questions about a specific program, or how's the farmers market doing, or some any revenue of any program, please let us know, and we can dig into those numbers.
Thank you. I was going to ask this offline, but for example, in the 2023 revised revenue, the 159.45, that number seems at odds with the other graphs that we've seen, property tax revenue scenarios that show property tax revenue for 2023 at 150.1. Am I misunderstanding? Do we need to update this, or is there an explanation for why this says 150 and this says close to 160?
Yeah, it'll be those. So this 159 is the entire county budget, and outside of county operations, general fund, road and bridge fund, health fund, human services fund. There are improvement districts that we budget for, and then Foothills Gateway, the 0.75, that's a pass-through. We collect it and then we distribute it to Foothills Gateway. And so in talking about impacts to the county, I think that's the difference there between the 150 and the 159. Yeah. Good question.
Thank you.
So on the expense categories, personnel, there's a 2% market and a 3% merit increase from 23 to 24. We only budget half of the merit increase in department budgets for salaries, because your merit increase is awarded upon review. If you have a successful performance review, you're eligible for that. But it happens on your work anniversary, so if your work anniversary is December, you don't need to budget for the full year, right? So we just budget half of the merit, the full market. So that's a 3.5% increase in salary budgets. Benefits also are included in this category. Health insurance was flat, which props to our benefits team for managing that. I know they work hard. The additional increase to get to the 5 is there's full funding for additional jail and CJA expansion positions that were only partially funded in the current year because the facilities weren't open, January 1st. There's also additional money for overtime, $500,000 and $800,000 for temp wages, largely in Conservation Corps and Department of Natural Resources. So that's personnel. Big part of our budget. Operating, there's a lot in here. It was hard to describe the story because there's so many departments and funds, but the reason for the decline is disaster relief, COVID recovery spending is budgeted to be so much lower, $28 million lower. Behavioral health will be up $5 million, solid waste down $5.5 million, but it nets out to be a 10% change from 24 to over 23. Capital outlay, we've talked about that a few times. Projects are coming to a close. There's still a lot going on, $52 million in capital spending. That's replacement of vehicles, of facilities, the fleet campus, IT capital spending on infrastructure, road spending. There's a lot of capital spending going on, but it is so much less than 23 because of the completion of those major facility projects. Certificate of participation. This is to cover the cost of the jail improvement project. The payments are flat. I think the difference in the $9,000 is like financing fees there. And then other financing uses, that's again those transfers, inter-fund transfers, interdepartmental transfers that are associated with capital projects and other large projects that are coming to a close. Okay, any questions on expense categories or specific departments that we could dig into?
Commissioner Stevens has her hands
Yeah,
raised.
with the certificates of participation for the jail improvements, how long do those payments go on? How long? I mean, was that- was
Those
that 30
were
years?
15 years.
Okay. And when did they start?
They started in, I want to say 2019, so 2033 or 34, I think is when those come. I'll get you the exact year, but I believe it's early 30s.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And we'll talk about the general fund projection now. So like we said, Proposition HH is assumed to pass in this scenario. We got this partly cloudy icon for the economic outlook. Slow growth, much slower growth than prior years, but no recession either, as that outlook is getting better. But continued legislative uncertainty. So we're not predicting that spending will be much higher than it is now, besides regular cost increases for inflation and personnel. So there's Green Mountain. And when we show this, your assumptions today really impact how far out the change goes into the future. They compound every year. And so really the 24, 25, 26, those are the numbers that we want to be under the blue line and above the yellow line. That's our kind of our target reserve, healthy fund balance. And we're structurally balanced under this budget, as is directed by you all and is in our policy. Okay, the final piece of the presentation is the public feedback piece. We have attended community conversations over the summer. If anybody wants to dig into the minutia of the budget, we have a wonderful tool called the Budget Explorer. It's on our website. You go to larimer.org/budget, and you can see how much has been allocated to each department, how much goes to public safety and to social services and to infrastructure. See a process or a timeline like we talked about. We solicit feedback online through that website. We also are having 2 community conversations. One is this Saturday at the Loveland Build. No? Is this at the Loveland Building? That might be an error. Is this the joint one with Loveland Fire? Is this in Johnstown?
I think this one is hosted at Loveland Fire Station.
It's hosted at station number 10, which is in Johnstown.
Yeah, this is at station number 10 in
Which is-
Johnstown.
It's
So-
it's near the Shields. It's the brand new one.
Yeah, this is an error. But then October 28th, next Saturday, it'll be at the Poudre Fire Authority station on Remington. Then we also have our public hearing, which we talked about on the calendar. A community survey, which is a statistically valid survey outreach that we do every year. There are budget questions included this time, so we'll get some statistically significant answers for the adopted budget. There are American Rescue Plan Act work sessions monthly, and finally we'll adopt the budget on December 14th at 2 p.m. here in this building in the hearing room. And that will take us to next year, and we'll do it all again. If there are any questions or clarifications, I know that was a lot. There is a lot in here.
Commissioners, I'll add, before you begin to add your comments and questions, you have discussed doing a temporary mill levy credit, and that is not included in this because we have not yet landed on what that number will be. We'll talk about that at the retreat, and certainly at the public hearing. So we'll have more information for you shortly so that you have good information to make your decisions.
Commissioner Stevens.
Yeah, so with that mill levy credit, that's not reflected in the general fund balance projection,
It is.
or it is?
It is the way we will reach the Proposition H, HH cap.
Okay.
So it's just a mechanism to get to that cap. I think our county manager is talking about if HH should fail. You
Right.
all have said in other settings that you would like to do a temporary mill levy credit regardless because of the increase in values. And that level we would discuss after the election.
Thank you for that clarification. Yes, right. If HH does not pass, then you all have talked about doing a temporary mill levy credit as relief for taxpayers.
Right, okay. And then I have I don't know if I remember my other question. I'll just pass for now and.
So I have a quick question. If I might, thank you. In 2029, we know there's some uncertainty. I hear there might be a legislative fix or solution. As we know, in 2029, we'll start to, after 25 years of not receiving our property tax on Centerra, URA, they've been keeping 100% for the last 20 years. So that will expire, or that URA will expire in 2029. So is that part of this increase, is seeing that, or is that not included, because I know right now it counts against us in our cap. I know there's been talk about maybe it was legislative solution for that. So I'm wondering if that also corresponds with some of this above the 20% that we'd like to be at, or is this just kind of anticipated budget savings as we go forward?
Yeah, that's a great point. This forecast is built as if HH passes, like we've mentioned. So other forecasts you've seen in, like you said, 2029 and 2030, the Timnath URA and the Centera Loveland URA are set to expire, and that would return, should HH not pass, about $10 million in revenues back to Larimer County. Now, HH does not specify, it talks about voter-approved mill levies, new growth, bond mill levies, but it does not mention mill levy or assessed values that would return to the original taxing authorities. And it wouldn't just impact counties, it would impact other property tax jurisdictions. And so this assumes that even though those districts would expire, the revenue would not come back to the county.
Okay. That's helpful. Thank you. Commissioner Kalfas.
Thank you for asking that question. Here's one for you. So, appreciate all these rather meticulous timelines and ultimately adopting a budget, if all goes well, by December 14th. What happens to our meticulous timelines should Prop HH pass and then a lawsuit is filed and it goes to the courts? And how does that affect these timelines? Because I'm based on the Colorado Supreme Court ruling, they determined, if I remember correctly, that they would have judicial jurisdiction or legal jurisdiction to consider the single subject rule should this thing pass.
Yeah, I think we would look for direction from the county manager, but if a lawsuit were filed and Prop HH was invalidated, those revenues the scenario would be better, not worse. And so it's, easier to add things than to take away things that have been added. So I think we would continue to adopt the budget on December 14th and then
That's what I
revise
would
it.
recommend. We have this list of things we might add back in. Should HH fail, we would use that same kind of list. But until the Supreme Court rules on the validity of HH, I think we would operate as if it is valid. We might change if we get a ruling in March or April that might revisit 2023 spending.
Yeah.
But I think the safe thing to do would be to continue to follow the HH guidelines.
And if HH fails and there's a special session, kind of the same scenario.
Right.
That's right also, yeah. Well, I think we're growing increasingly accustomed to a fair amount of uncertainty, certainly when it comes to trying to figure out about balanced budgets. So you folks deserve an awful lot of credit, yeah. Besides
you,
how well
Commissioner.
dress, how nicely you dress.
Yeah, I was going to say you're almost twinning today. Just to tease you a little bit, you look great. Commissioner Stevens, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, so I thought of a few of the questions I have. So,
Sarah, could she talk into the mic more?
oh yeah, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So
That's-
it sounds like you've been talking to the departments, and I appreciate this, a preparation for that, if HH passes, if it passes or if it doesn't pass, there's another initiative right around the corner, which is 50, which you just talked briefly about. So they're prepared, they understand that, when, I think it was Commissioner Shannon McNally was asking about, or Commissioner Corvallis was asking about how we fund these, how these things are ongoing, and you mentioned that some of them aren't ongoing and that they're one time, but things like the domestic violence program to the tune of 300,000 plus is for an example of an ongoing. So, I mean, I hope that they're understanding that, that all bets are off with next year of what that might look like.
I can tell you, we had very robust conversations with every department and office about that, not only about things that might be funded as service proposals for 2024 should HH fail, but also be prepared with this exercise again next year. So as you go through the year, look at your services, evaluate so that you're not waiting until budget time to look back and come up with program ideas. And without exception, every one of them said they understood that was what they would need to do. The DA's office in particular, I talked to about this, and they know they may have tough decisions to make about other funding or other positions or these positions, depending on what happens with Initiative 50. So it's all open and on the table and uncertain.
Yeah.
And, we'll do the best we can. To their credit, they did propose that these positions begin mid-year, not the full year, but that gives them some time to sort of see what's happening, the lay of the land, do a recruitment, and get those positions staffed. We may know by July that we see this is happening, or we see a lot of public support, and maybe we hold off a little longer.
And, and thinking about why it would be hard to, for something like Initiative 50, why that would be so difficult, I'm thinking, and you talked briefly about some of the service proposals and like inmate food and medical costs. What was the percentage increase in inmate food and medical costs this year?
There were separate contracts. Medical, I believe, I'll get you the accurate number, but it was about a 5.5 million increase to 7.5. So I don't know what the percentage is on that. I should know how to do math better, but significant increase.
Significant, and way more than the normal inflation numbers we're seeing.
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing that in other areas like insurance and other areas. So, I think that there's some belief in the public that why can't you sort of live within your means and why should we expand government? And this is not an expansion of government. These are just costs that are way above what, normal inflationary costs are, right? And some of it is because of mandates and some of it's because of other situations. But everything, everything is costing a lot more than just, the 4% or 8% that, we've seen with inflation. A lot of our costs are much, much higher than that for a variety of reasons. And so I think it's just, when people say, why can't you live within your means? And I appreciate you emphasizing the belt tightening that was already done and the exercise that we asked all of our departments to do. But I just think that it's really good to be clear with the public is that some of this is no expansion of services at all. It's just these ongoing costs that are expensive and some of the insurance costs that we're seeing because of, whether it's because of lawsuits or it's because of, no tort reform or whatever kind of situations there are. There's just things that are beyond our control when it comes to spending. And then, with regard to having having reserves, we don't know when the next natural disaster is coming that we have to fund as well. And those are reimbursements for FEMA. And how much are we waiting for in FEMA reimbursements at this point?
I was talking to the accounting manager at Road and Bridge, and there's a $10 million reimbursement that's ready to go. All the paperwork's been submitted. We just need the reviews and
So 10
and the
million
check.
left after 10 years.
After 10 years.
Yeah.
So $10 million of reimbursements after 10 years. So we're not only are these things that we have to get reimbursed for, and we have to have the initial outlay for these expenditures that we might not get reimbursed for a decade from the federal government. And that's money that, that comes out of our general fund that, so there's a lot of pressures on these funds that are not within our control. And so I guess I just want to make that clear to the public of when people are saying, we don't want this expansion of government or we want smaller government. This is not this crazy increase in government. There are few FTEs that are proposed, how many FTEs are proposed in the budget? New FTEs?
for?
For a full-time,
Yeah, so I was looking at that figure. There is one in fleet. I think there's 4 net, but only one is not a converted temp or limited term
so
with the
we're,
reductions.
so there's barely any expansion in our full-time employees, even though our population is increasing, even though in many cases, some of the services we provide in child protection, things are becoming more complicated. In the legal sphere, things are becoming more complicated, and there's an increase in population, and yet we're not increasing the number of employees we have. So, all that, I'm just trying to make a point here is that when we have these conversations about this windfall, which we don't plan to accept a windfall, and we're looking at measures to not do that, but we are not talking about increasing government in any kind of measurable way. This is just the cost of doing business right now. And so I guess I just wanted to make that point, and sorry to take so long to do so. But I appreciate the information that you've given us, and I'm comfortable with where we're at, and I look forward to having discussions with the public. So I encourage folks to come join us on the 21st or 28th to really talk about the budget and understand it better. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Stevens. Commissioner Gonzalez, any comments or final statements? I'd like to make a few comments. First, just our gratitude to all 3 of you, because I know you all have been watching this and kind of navigating the uncertainty and kind of the unclear. When this all came out as the end of the session, the Senate Bill 303 and then became HH, and we had some questions, and there wasn't unclear about if it was 8 or 4% and all those things. And certainly I have probably sat in, I think I estimated 12 hours of meetings discussing HH since, so it's been quite an investment in time to navigate this. And I did think of, we had elected officials lunch on Monday. I did thank all we have 10 elected officials here in Larimer County, and we are each an individual elected official. And so I thanked everyone for those in our lunch for their patience and their participation and their willingness to work through this process with all of us. I want to let you know that we thanked them at our lunch, because everyone had to kind of do their part. And so I want to thank all of our employees and staff and all the department heads and directors who have, for 2 years now, painstakingly looked at efficiencies, innovations, and things that they could do to contribute overall, so that it was the burden was kind of shared across the whole county. And I want to thank you all for watching the lawsuits, the Supreme Court decisions. Alex, you've been keeping a really good pulse on all of that, and just appreciate helping us stay on top of this, because there's a lot of moving parts. And hopefully, if depending on how this election goes, maybe it will pass, maybe it won't pass. But hopefully they'll think about some of these things like the expiring ERAs and some of these things that they hadn't thought about that have a really tremendous impact on counties that are for no fault of our own. It's just, these things are happening. And so I wanted to express my profound gratitude for the work that you do to make this months and weeks down into an hour and a half of this presentation. This certainly looks better than it did when we first started this exercise, only because our departments have made significant cuts, meaningful cuts. They were very painful. There are a lot of these on this list that I was cringing, because they're really important, successful programs, but we had to make a balanced budget. And so I know this looks positive, but this is what the work that you all did along with all of our departments to get. So we had a balanced budget. So I want to say thank you to that. I think that's a really important point, is we're trying to deal with the consequences of what is in front of us, but also, as Commissioner Stevens says, we certainly run lean here. We do a lot with less all the time, and there are a lot of unfunded mandates from the state and other folks that we figure out a way, but it's certainly not fun or comfortable at times to figure out how we adjust to these things. So I want to just express my gratitude and appreciation for all the exercise that people go through and their patience as we try to figure this all out. And in a couple weeks, we'll know more, or actually 2.5 weeks, I think. We'll know some of these points. I look forward to that discussion, and I just want to just say it's certainly something I'm willing and to talk about with the public. I look forward to their questions and conversations. Hopefully, we have a lot of folks come, and I welcome. I've had people reach out to me. I'm having a community conversation or common grounds up in Estes Park. I know I've already gotten an email. Someone's going to come and ask me questions, and so that will be interesting to have those discussions. I'll be bringing some of this with me, but I just want to just express my gratitude to everyone, and certainly know we have some more discussions and hearings to go through, and I look forward to that discussion. So these are hard decisions, but we're hopefully the public sees we've been very thorough and thoughtful and trying to be intentional with some of this work. So, and Lorenda, anything else you want to say to wrap it up?
I guess I'll wrap it up by saying some of the reductions you see on the list that Matthew talked about are, we tried our best not to impact the public any more than we had to. If there is another round, these will look different. To Commissioner Stevens' point, it's important that we have a strong savings account because FEMA is a reimbursement program, doesn't front the money, and it's our obligation to put the community back better maybe than it was before. We have a good history of that, but these cuts hurt. If there are further needs to make further reductions, we'll be talking about what the county statutorily must provide and really basing the budget on what's required with maybe a few extras if we can afford them. But thank you. I can't let this end without saying you guys made this easy. It was a hard year. You did the technical pieces, and it was wonderful. The departments and offices were committed to explaining the impact of each reduction, how it might touch the public, how it might touch other funding sources. And I really appreciate the way they approached this. Without them, we would just be picking and choosing things that we don't know the impact of. And their partnership was really critical to getting to this place. So thank you to them. Thank you to all of you for your support. We'll just keep answering questions.
Thank you, Lorenda. I think that's really good points you made. And I know that you and the team sat in this room for hours listening to all these proposals and these budgets. So thank you to you and Lori and the team for hours and hours of work to get to this point. It does look very easy, but this is years worth of work, so appreciate it very much. So without any other further comments or questions, I believe at 3:09 we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you.